really build using materials that they come across. You'll find people living in polythene bag houses, and if you are to design for them a unit that is worth 1.5, then we still have to think about how they're going to finance this. And that financing for me is informed by the experts. Thank you.
Yeah, and just qualify my 1.5. It includes everything, land, finance, and everything.
Okay.
So the buildings we build, we do a bed sitter from under 400,000, 375.
Okay.
So, and if you add the land and everything, that type of thing, probably for a one bed, would come out about 1.5, depending on where it is, obviously.
That's a good. So it's
the big challenge is when people say a cost. I always say, I'm an ex-QS. I always say, well, what's included?
Yeah.
Too many people will say, oh, I can do a 3D printed house for $5,000, and it only includes a part of it, or whatever, So I always say, what's included is always my first question. And it's like you say about bedrooms. You can have a 2-bedroomed house with small bedrooms, or a 2-bedroomed house with big bedrooms. And you've got to be very careful with quoting these things.
And square meter size of that 1.5 is?
Well, the one we're doing here, the 375, including VAT and everything, is 180 square feet, 16 square meters. It's a bed sitter. $500,000 for a one bed, 26 square meters.
Okay.
Thank you. I think I do agree it's difficult to put a price to it because obviously by the day, I think you've all noticed the increase in cost of materials. So I think the opportunities where we are discussing price is, I would like to think, is in how do we finance this, what incentives are available, because cost of materials is going to be fixed, cost of land and utilities is going to be fixed, it's habitable. So it's not just the building cost that we should look at, rather than the cost of availing the unit to be habitable. So the opportunities are on for various reasons, yet there are alternatives. These alternatives manufacturing should be broader, so that then we can bring all players, the financiers, the land, the planners.
I think what has been said about affordability, it's relative. I guess it depends on for whom and what materials. But I'd say from a financial institution perspective, I think the crux of the matter in terms of affordability is looking at alternative materials, which then they start recognizing and being able to fund fast. So we've seen a number of people building, containers are not cheap actually, but containers are being used as an alternative, and those are actual areas that we are looking at as a bank to say then we can be able to fund a container built house as compared to what we're used to, which is brick and mortar. But also, I think also getting a portfolio of many clients who come together. They might be small clients, but when they come together, then they form a sizable portfolio which can be funded at an individual basis, but has been brought together. I think those are some of the levers which we are trying to drive through for affordability and above, of course, the affordable housing initiative by the government, and which is relative again. Is it affordable? Looking at the costs and the prices of the houses, I guess it depends again on who you're targeting. Yeah, for whom.
Ted, did you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't want to repeat what has been said, but again, this is disproportionate when you talk about affordability. I mean, we're coming from the sustainability side of it, working with financiers like ABSA to tap into green loans and green mortgages. Just a 1% difference is a big difference. So cheaper financing, because of course climate change is real. The lead up to COP, there's a lot of financing. But it's that banking institutions, need to, there's a lot of capacity building that needs to be done. Because how do you then measure and say, this is a green, affordable house? So we're on the capacity building side, working with banking and financing institutions, but there are, IFC, for example, has already given banks loans to extend green mortgages, and that then changes the question. Is 1.5 cheap? I mean, if it's financed well, then you can make it cheap, right? So, or affordable. So that's, but it really comes down to financing and how you able to tie green and sustainability into that financing.
So you've now heard, there's a US phrase, follow the money. So everybody's telling you follow the money here. And now we have to ask, we're launching here the Jenga Green Library, and I hope you've all had a chance to open it and see what's there. And in that library, you have some of these alternative building materials that we're talking about, and the booths that are surrounding in the back. And so now we look at follow the money to which material, and I'm not against concrete, don't worry. There's plenty of ways to mix concrete with plastic and different ways of lightweight concrete. So I'm not one of those people that will say you can't build with concrete if you're trying to do climate. When you look at these different building materials, for example, if you went to an architect, how many of you get any requests for different materials? Because I'm told in Kenya people know stone, they know cement, that's the building code, that's what approved, and there's no other material. We're now changing the building code to allow some recycled materials. So give your perspective of challenges in getting these locally manufactured. I've heard a lot about standards too, locally manufactured building materials.
Thank you. I'll attempt to answer based on experience. It's not common to find members of the public asking for alternative building materials. Why? Because quite often they say the materials are not tested. We had a project where we had EPS panels being used as fill, and there was a lot of resistance from the client side because they were not convinced that the materials were durable. You also find instances where clients are determined to use a particular material regardless of the advice. For example, where I come from in the local areas, you try to tell somebody, because my region is hot and wet, there's a lot of rainfall, and it's also very hot. So you try to tell them to explore the use of, say, thatched buildings. They tell you that's not conventional building material, that's traditional. And we are moving away from grass thatched buildings to, mabati roofed. So how then do you strike a balance between convincing the client to use the materials that are readily available and they are renewable? Grass, for that matter, is very renewable, as opposed to using mabati. So the dilemma is the clients already have a preset and fixed mind on the kinds of materials they want, and you're trying to tell them to try new technology. So it becomes a very delicate balance. I have yet to convince a client to use alternative building material. So from that point of view, I think we have a long way to go. Thank you.
Yeah, we had exactly that problem, even though we're using concrete. We started in 2016, and it took us till about 2018 to really get even the beginnings of traction. And people have seen lots of fancy tables, lots of fancy presentations, lots of good selling things, but until people can bang the walls, people are not interested. We've now built about over 50 units in Kawangware, and now they're beginning to self-sell because all these guys, the landlords all talk to each other. Nobody wants to go first. Nobody wants to make a fool of themselves. So whatever the product is, until you've got some traction and some track record, it's really, really hard to change perceptions. And so how do you get the traction? The sales without the track record, it takes a long time. So that's one of the things, whatever the product is, you've got to crack.
Yeah, that's definitely a good answer, and something that we've encountered as well. I'm maybe not the person that has the most experience for this question. Our products aren't currently being used by any developers for housing. But I would say by definition of what we're doing, recycling plastic and extruding and injection molding solid pieces, I would say, all you hear on the news nowadays when you're talking about plastic is, oh, this bottle or taka-taka that you find on the side of the road will never decompose. It'll be 1,000 years and it'll still be sitting there, same as it is now. And I think we've turned that from being a weakness into really more of a strength, where our products are weather resistant, heat resistant, and they're just the same plastic benefits that you would normally get.
Okay, thank you. Let me say, starting from, we do have, need to change the mindset, because there are, barriers, mental, psychological barriers, when it comes to the approach that a lot of consumers have in Made in Kenya. Made in Kenya products does not mean actually that they are not of good quality, because there's a lot of investment that goes into setting up the manufacturing facilities that are available in this country. And in order for them to, prices to become a bit more, affordable, then we need to get scale. So once the consumers accept our Made in Kenya products, then of course economies of scale set in and prices become more affordable, and I guess availability is also ensured. So the ability to scale, the ability to have the mindset shift is extremely important. And I do empathize with the professionals, because those who tend to look for quote-unquote affordable housing are not likely to approach an architect. They'll go to their guy by the, the relative who builds and tell them to, and asks, for a construction solution. So in as much as the built environment professionals want to support green building, sustainability, then we do have to find another way of stakeholder engagement, reaching the off-takers, so that then there is the mind shift change, and that they see some value in actually approaching the professionals and also consuming locally made solutions. The building code is, I think, at its last stage of review. And once that is done, then I guess it's also going to be easier for the financiers to be able to, to finance these solutions. They'll become mortgageable, so then it will be easier. But then it's all in the mind. It's all in the mind. It has to change.
Yeah, I think for the financial institution, and you've mentioned it, it becomes very hard to finance something which is not in the building code. So I think there's a lot of policy work to be done, and I'm happy to hear there's conversation at that level, because then it makes it easier for us as a bank to then be able to finance. But that said, I think there's also a role that we can play in funding some of the innovations for proof of concepts, because I think once you get a proof of concept, it becomes much easier to kind of understand the product and how it works, what are the benefits, and therefore we use that opportunity to also engage our customers so that they are able to know that this is existing, they can be able to use it as an alternative. So I think funding some of the innovations for proof of concepts, and I think having thought leadership pieces with our customers to just enlighten and close that gap in knowledge on what is existing. And I think the green building, the green materials library is really a fantastic place to start, because one of the things even when we are having conversations, for example, with the credit teams, and we're saying we need to be able to fund green buildings, then the customers always come back and ask, so where do we get these green materials from? And therefore, having such a library really helps, because we don't have to reinvent it. We just have to adopt it within and say to the clients, if you're getting your materials from anyone within this green buildings library, then we can confirm that they have been checked out by the Kenya Green Building Society and whichever other partners you're working with, and we are confident that they are qualified. So that makes it much easier for us as well to be able to fund some of the green building materials ecosystem in its entirety.
And from the banking perspective, I'm not forgetting Ted, from the banking perspective, having this green building library, would it help if there was a certification label on the products, or just having them in the library is enough?
It definitely would help to have a level of certification then that makes them qualify to be on the library. So in the same way, when we are funding a contractor and we need them to have a NEMA certificate, then we know there's a check that has been done, is valid, and therefore we can go with that certificate. So it would help to know there's a level of screening and checking before someone qualifies to be on the library, so that we don't have to have an additional layer of scrutinizing, and therefore we can just use it as is, knowing that they have met the checks.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question you asked the architect, to me, the question is alternative building technology. So when we talk about green products, it's always alternative building technology. And the example he gave, he said the client will not go with a grass thatched roof, will go with a mabati roof. So I just wanted to ask also the audience, like, how many have been inside a mabati house, like full mabati house at midday when the sun is scorching, right? You understand how hot it is. Is that really appropriate? So the question is not alternative, but appropriate building technology. And when we start talking about this as the appropriate building technology, then you'll start to see why green buildings is not an option. It's not. It should never be an option. It's what we're trying to advocate for is appropriate building technology, so that we start seeing why it's appropriate. Why is it appropriate? Number one, it unlocks opportunities. You have ISK here, which is a school that's, they've come up with their own injection molding machine that can recycle plastic, they can make gutters from it. Why don't we want to unlock those opportunities for our youth? Do you want to just, if you can get a house that can unlock opportunities for youth, can solve questions of ESG in terms of women empowerment, that can reduce, the impact on the environment, that can, as Winnie of CAM has said, that can improve our industries locally, so that when there's, external influencing factors that have caused, the prices of petrol to go up and prices of fuel to go up, but if we were able to locally manufacture, then we boost our own economy. So it's actually appropriate, and it's, the time for it is now, and it's not an option, it's not an alternative, and the professionals should push for that. We've also really tried to emphasize this for the media. There's a lot of media that has come here, and I think in such events we should definitely always invite media, because if media is not communicating what we're advocating for, then we sort of sit in an echo chamber and advocate to ourselves, right?
And then this question is going to be a little technical, and not that I'm expecting answers, just putting the idea out there. In terms of toxic materials and toxic additives, because that's a part, everybody says green is sort of the recycling and all that, but it's also making sure that the chemicals in the building materials are safe. So to what extent are those discussions occurring anywhere right now?
So maybe I can give that a go and see. That's a very good question. In fact, when we were working on the materials directory, that really came to play in terms of toxicity, right? How do we factor in toxicity into the materials? I know MAPE, which is coming up, is going to do a presentation on that. There are, now as you go out to the market, you see low VOC paints. You never saw that before. Of course, low VOC is still not optimum, and you can go farther than that. But it's a good start, because we have to look at it in terms of health and well-being. We spend most of our times in buildings. We've spent, the last 2 hours in this building, and what is it doing to our health? Because you don't want to be in a place that, the indoor environmental air quality affects you. So we need to start factoring that into the directory as well. And that's why when I started off my welcome remarks, I said we're looking for partnerships, because we want to also go the full length and do life cycle analysis of products. Partner with manufacturers, partner with people who are doing EPD declarations, so that we can now get down to the toxicity. So as you go to the market to buy a product, you can then ask the supplier, and this all goes down back to KEBS, because KEBS is the standards body. So that's part of the task force that we're working on, to come up with standards for products that go beyond just this product will work, or in terms of strength, in terms of, you know, the current. I think that's part of the life cycle of Jenga Green Library, and that's why we're saying it's an open library. It's not static. It's not a KGBS library. It's really a public library, and we really need all of you to get it to the next level.
Ted said what I wanted to say. However, I could add, when it comes to materials, I think users need to be a bit, have to be made aware, and I guess conversations should be happening and are happening about the availability of data, especially in the technical data sheets. Most products that are available in the market actually have technical data sheets, whether they are imported or local. So it's the awareness of the user to access this data, go through it. It always defines what the product is made of. Most, at least for our members in KM, most of us declare what our products are made of through the technical data sheet. So find this data, go through it. You will find everything available about the product, but we need to be conscious about specifications. These have to be very, very clear, so that then one is able to declare what is toxic, what is non-toxic. However, as the conversations are happening, then I think it's important that we continuously make the public aware. There are several technical committees in KEBS that I think some of us are actually members of. Participate in these technical committees. They are open to, you can join, and once you're in these forums, then you can influence this process of standards creation, and also what kind of tests are to be applied on materials and what kind of marking is to be applied on materials. So I think it is our responsibilities to come out and join these committees and participate, then we'll be able to avail the information to the public. So the question is, how do we find the technical data sheets? Ask the manufacturers, just ask. Once you ask, you will get them. Go to websites, they are generally available on websites. So go find them on the websites, ask the manufacturers, you'll be able to get them. And if you're not sure, approach KEBS, they will give them to you. Or they will tell you whether this product has the S mark or is actually approved for local consumption. So be aware, look at the stamps. All products should have the standardization stamp, so that then you know that it is approved. You can scan, you can download the apps. I don't work for KEBS, but these things are actually available.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's useful as well to, that guide is good, but unlike electronic products, in a lot of places now, they have like a temperature grading from green, which is level A, down to red. I think something like that to make it super easy for the average person to understand. You don't need to read the data sheet. So any form of guide, recognized guide that will, there's a pass, but there's also a very good pass and an average pass, and which products are level A and which ones are C. Something like that I think would be really useful, just to decipher the technical data sheets, because I don't understand half of them. So, it just makes it easy for people.
That's a very good point, and definitely things that could be added to the library functionality of the library as we move forward. Any other comments on that before?
Yeah, just on the data sheets, I think also for all the products on the library, we've made a point to make sure that there are data sheets. So none of the products that are listed as green building materials on our directory don't have the data sheet. So we've also strived to source that data sheet data for the directory.
And then you bring up, when you mention this rating system, sort of simplicity of accessing the information, not only on the quality of the material, but also the toxicity of the material, the recyclability of the material. Now you brought up a really good thing in terms of simplification. We have, if green also means inclusive. And we have to recognize that there are different levels of awareness, different levels of education, different levels of literacy. So as we sit here, we're probably, I don't know that we think of ourselves as the elite of Kenya, but probably there are others who would think of us as the elite of Kenya. How do we make the discussion that we're having here and the tool like the Jenga Green Library accessible to those who need it most? And that means those who are often excluded from this discussion, not by, it just happens by default because, you're not in the right social circle. How do we reach out to them and make this Green Library part of their ecosystem?
Thank you very much for that question. At AAK, for instance, we conduct an annual Jeunam Jengo campaign. And this is the brainchild of former President Emma Miloyo. And we found that it's a very powerful tool, in fact, as one of the ways to connect with the public, where we talk about a number of issues. For instance, we take them through the approval processes. If you want to design and realize your project, what are the things you need to do? We also talk about materials. We have not been very successful because AAK is a very small organization. I think in the country, about 3,000 architects in good standing. For a population of 50 million, 3,000 is a very, very small number. So our activities have largely been in Nairobi. Last 2 years, we've attempted to reach out through the media, where we have guest speakers come onto radio and talk about what we do and why they need to employ professionals when they are doing construction. So the question then is, how do we cascade it to the counties and even to schools, probably primary schools, secondary schools, where most of our people are in the villages. We've attempted to do, for instance, this year we are planning to do an exercise in counties. We have yet to really figure out how we'll do it, but we were hoping that we can count on the county governments and our architects in the county governments who can then reach out and just talk about a number of issues that are in construction. So for us at AAK, I think we've started. We may not have succeeded, but we've started. I think it's a step in the right direction. Thank you.
So I'm not sure how much insight I can provide specifically for the library, but definitely in terms of sustainable building and green building, certainly throughout Kenya. One of the super unique things about our initiative is that we currently have 12 workshops open so far across the country, in the coast, in Turkana, in Nairobi, and that really emphasizes the need to spread the message, not through, of course, media is definitely a big part, but just through the regular plastic recycling initiatives throughout the country, really at the grassroots level. So, the Wananchi throughout the country collecting the plastic, designing, and really making the final products on these machines throughout the country, more about it and become more actively involved, which I think is how we really spread the message to every single person.
Yeah, so I think how do you get to the bottom of the pyramid was your question. And if you really think about it in terms of developers, right? Because at the end of the day, we're trying to get these products into houses that are going to, into buildings that are going to be used by the bottom of the pyramid. So it's the developers. How do you get people like Kwangu Kwako who's saying, we're doing developments for affordable housing, and that's our key segment. How do you capacity build for them to see the need, right? And that goes back now to the counties, as he's mentioned. How do you go into the county approval process so that there's incentives, right? Right now we're working with like Kipe County on government incentives, so faster building approval. So it doesn't even have to be a monetary incentive. It can just say if your building is a green building, then you have a faster approval process. And so that's one of the incentives that we're working with like Kipe County, and that automatically unlocks to the bottom of the pyramid, because as the developer comes, he says, first of all, I want it to be affordable, then I can do it faster, and then he'll say, okay, then let me just do it green. In that way, then you find these products within these buildings that the bottom of the pyramid is using. But then again, I think what Carl said about Plastiki Rafiki and their model, it's really grassroots. If you, I'd invite the audience to visit their desk, but when I saw it, it's purely grassroots. It's within a school. They have this injection molding plant that they've built from locally sourced materials. They have 12 workshops around the country, and people collect plastic, and you can make plastic gutters, you can make plastic bricks. You can really do so much, and it's really grassroots. So it's how do you create